Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Guess what? 2019 has about 2 more days or so, several days, right after Christmas, and right after Christmas. And guess what? We're going to be going in 2020. It says 2020. When I think about that, come 2020, I will be taking my glasses off because I will clearly be able to understand what's going on with the issues. And this is a very, very important piece. But anyway, taking the little small humor out of it, we're going into 2020, and there's many changes, and right up front with it, we're looking forward to being a part of those changes here at the Oregon Voters Digest. So what we're going to do this time around is that we're going to close with 19, and I'm going to identify, as far as I'm concerned, the top issues for 2019. We've done a number of things in 2019, but these are the top issues, and I've got guests that will be speaking to each of those areas. And my first guest is a gentleman by the name of Ron Buell. And he's here with me now, and then I'm going to introduce the other guests as we go along. And we're going to give Ron about a good 15 minutes. About 15 minutes, he's going to do what he has to do. And then after that, we're probably going to have a gentleman, Scott Jurgensen, and a gentleman by the name of Richard Burton. Again, they've got something to say about maybe a little slight piece of the impeachment piece. Look like that's the exciting things about what's going on with us right now, and that should be very entertaining too. I know both of these guys. It's kind of interesting, very interesting. And then the third group would be basically some of our young people here within our area. And in all due respect, we've gotten 2 groups here that's been a major of concern here within the city of Portland, i.e. with the Patriot Group and Antifa. And they're going to comment about that and what they felt were the issues and why they were doing what they were doing or whatever. But the whole idea is that as far as those are my picks. Those are my pick, and I think we're going to have some fun for this year. So this is the close, and then you can join me on the 2nd of February, and that's when we will begin. We're going to open up the door with elections, and we're going to have probably the city auditor here to tell you there's still time to run for office. And we're going to interview that person, and you're going to all file because we got the primary. And right up the front, I'm not trying to take a position, but I've done it already. I have filed already. I'm running for mayor of the city of Portland. And guess what? I am your mayor now. When I filed to run for office, I've got until May, if you will. But the bottom line is, money is always the issue. But the fairness, and I'm going to open up this quote right now. I'm going to quit talking right now because the fairness, I'm really excited about this time period because that's what I've been doing from a historical standpoint. I've run several times, but I couldn't get the money. I just didn't know the money. But now, guess what? There's a fairness situation effort that's been made, almost right at the end of the year of 2019, and I'm excited about it. And I've got the person on right now. I'm going to introduce him, and I'm going to let him talk. His name is Ron Buell. Ron, welcome to Voters Digest.
Thank you, Bruce.
And you've been here before.
Yes, I have.
And we know one another for quite some time on a number of things. He's always been a fighter, but he got very much involved with the whole issue of honest elections. And with that, I'm just going to go and open it up. Ron, let us know what's going on. What is your purpose? What is the purpose about honest elections?
Well, both 2 organizations, Honest Elections and Portland Forward, that I've been involved with, have been trying to level the playing field, Bruce. Mm-hmm. And Oregon is one of only 5 states in the country that doesn't have contribution limits. And the other 45 states have limits on contributions. You go up to Seattle, you go down to California, you're going to find that people don't control the elections with their money like they do here in Oregon. So we had the governor's race where Phil Knight gave $3,500,000 to Newt Bueller. So some of that came in through the Governors Association of the Republicans. Governors Association. But the point is that the democracy needs to have a level playing field so that people cannot get big money out of politics was our lawn signs that we put up all over the city and county. So we're trying to say, look, the average voter, the average citizen doesn't have $3.5 million to give in a governor's race, and they should not be overcome by the money is not speech. Money is not speech. And so we're saying that the Oregon Constitution needs to be reformed, and the decision that was made in 2007 in Van Natta versus Kiesling by the Oregon Supreme Court that said, well, money is speech. You can't limit speech. If you limit money, you're limiting speech. And so that decision is being challenged in the Oregon Supreme Court right now, and in the Oregon legislature. In this last session of the Oregon legislature that ended in this year, 2019, at the very end of the session, the state legislature referred to the voters in November of 2020. The voters in the state will vote on a change to the Constitution which will allow limits. And so we have two things going on. There are these lawsuits that were filed on the local limits measures that we put on the ballot for the city, and that the county charter commission put on the ballot in the county. Those elections happened in 2016 and in 2018 for the city. So the Honest Elections in Portland Forward worked with members of the Charter Commission, and we said to them, hey, let's level the playing field, let's get big money out of politics, let's make it fair for everybody, give everybody a say in the democracy. And so the Charter Commission put on the ballot a measure which we helped to draft and suggest to them, and they voted to put it on the ballot in 2016 for Multnomah County, and meaning the chair and the commissioners could not take more than $500 contributions. So unless they formed a small donor committee, a small donor committee in which people could not give more than $100 a year to the small donor committee in the county. And so nonprofits and labor unions and corporations can form small donor committees as long as they don't take more than $100 from anyone in the county races. They can give an unlimited amount. They could collect 10,000 or 20,000 from small donors, and that keeps the average person in the ball game. Those small donor committees, and it seems to us fair that they're able to accumulate a number of contributors at less money than, significantly less money than $500, which an individual can give. Corporations can't give under this law, and so when it passed in Multnomah County, the Koch brothers and the Portland Board of Realtors and the Portland Business Association went to court and said, hey, this doesn't comport with Oregon's Constitution and the 2007 decision of the Oregon Supreme Court that said money is speech. And so they went to Multnomah County Circuit Court, and Judge Ernest Block said, yes, you are right, it doesn't comport with the 2007 decision. And so we appealed the judge's decision, in Multnomah County, and then we went to the Supreme Court with it directly. The Court of Appeals passed it right on up to the Oregon Supreme Court to make the decision. We didn't have to wait through a long process at the Court of Appeals. So the two organizations who
Keep going. Sorry about that.
who supported this, the two organizations who supported this, they said we want to take it to the court to make a decision. The arguments have been held in the Oregon Supreme Court.
Okay.
And the people that challenged the county measure were there, and we made our arguments, and the court should be making a decision in the next few weeks or months. They can take as long as they want to make that decision. So the county law was supposed to go into effect, when Judge Block passed it up to the Supreme Court, he said, well, with the passage of the time, it ought to pass, and it ought to take effect. We'll see what the Supreme Court is going to say, essentially, is what he said. So the groups, Honest Elections and Portland Forward, said, hey, it passed in the county, and the county includes the city of Portland. And if you just look at the city, why, we ought to take this measure and do the same thing in the city of Portland races that we did in the county races. So we went out and collected 55,000 signatures. And there was hundreds of people collecting those signatures to put the measure on the ballot for the city of Portland. And the measure was similar in that that limited city races, including the mayor's race and the city auditor's race and all 4 commissioner seats, to $500 a contribution. Well, that measure passed with 87.4% of the voters in the city saying, yes, we agree, we ought to level the playing field, we ought to, money is not speech, we ought to give everybody a fair shot at making a contribution that is similar, and we ought not to let wealthy people buy elections. And so the judge did something unusual. Judge Block, he said, well, you get this should be part of the decision being made at the Supreme Court because it's similar in its limits. Now, he said the taglines and the advertisements can go ahead, but I want you to wait until the Supreme Court makes a decision, basically, is what he's saying in the city race. Well, he didn't issue an injunction against the city, nor did he issue an injunction against the county. And the voters overwhelmingly passed these measures. So, and the measures call for penalties if you go over $500 with your campaign. So let's take the mayor's race.
Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Ted Wheeler, Mayor
City
Wheeler.
mayor, yeah.
The city mayor. Well, the Portland city attorney argued for the validity of these measures with us, joined our appeal at the Supreme Court and said these measures should be valid. And so the city attorney is there saying they should be valid. They aren't enjoined. The judge did not issue an injunction against going forward. So what Honest Elections and Portland Forward have done is we've said, hey, Mayor Wheeler, the people voted for this. You're not above the law. We think you should abide by this measure, and we're going to file claims, which we did on Friday, 2 days ago.
Okay.
We got them, actually it was Thursday, I'm sorry. We got them to the city auditor and said, please note the penalties in the law, because if you, so Wheeler has received, I think the number is 14 contributions totaling over $40,000.
Wow, who are some of these people that did this? Yeah,
Melvin Mark, for example, the big downtown realtors, and a series of other people who are, who I think people would recognize. There's no reason to call them out now. I mean, Wheeler's campaign is telling them it's all going to be okay. You can give this money, but the city charter says that now, because of voters passed it in and it hasn't been enjoined, the city charter says, well, there are penalties. So 2 to 20 times the amount given has to be paid to the city in penalties if you accept more than $500. And so, with 40,000 being given to Wheeler's campaigns in these contributions, as big as $5,000, some of them, the penalty could be 2 to 20 times.
2 to 20 times.
Yes, the amount given. So in this case, that would mean that Wheeler's, the minimum penalty that his campaign would have to pay back to the city is $80,000, and of course he had 120 grand sitting in his campaign coffers that he didn't use from the previous election, and money that people have given to him since then, and he's transferred that over, and only 9,000 of that 120,000 came in under 500.
Under 500, I got you.
So that's 111,000. So just if he, so we're wondering what the city auditor is going to do, because we're in this legal limbo land at the state Supreme Court, and is the auditor going to act like it hasn't been enjoined, which it hasn't been? The city attorney has argued that it's valid. Is the auditor going to impose these penalties? And we believe from our conversations that the auditor will begin to act as if it's real and impose the penalties, because they haven't been enjoined from doing to.
Well,
and the county elections office the same way. We think that the Lori Stegman
and
is
Lori Stegman, she's in the county, right?
Yeah, she's the county. She's over too, and we filed a complaint with the county election.
Well, isn't Loretta Smith still involved in the process?
No, she's not running for anything.
Well, she's not running, but it's my understanding she's still in court because Seth is still following up on that piece.
Well,
I'm just throwing that out. But my point is that she should have learned through this whole argument when Loretta was running for city council and she was still on the county seat, if you will.
Yeah.
That she should have known better. Now Stegman she's now that's the Korean. That's one minority, right? She's a Korean, right?
Yes, I believe
she was
so.
Korean, and
Yes,
in
at
fact,
least part Korean.
I still remember she was a Republican, and then she just re-registered. She's a Democrat now. And then another piece I'll throw on the table is that this still is a government of the people and by the people and for the people, right?
Yeah. Well, Stegman has another problem that's interesting. To me, her problem is that her campaign literature has her county phone number on it, so the little Hatch Act is involved. You cannot be sending voters to your county office to talk about the campaign, and so if in contacting her about the complaints we filed, we had to talk to people in the county commissioner's office to do that. So she's in violation of the Little Hatch Act as well, because you can't have people who are employed by the county helping your campaign.
Exactly.
So Stegman's got it going both ways. But Wheeler's got himself, I mean, if he bets that the Supreme Court is going to uphold Van Adem
Well,
versus
80 pounds.
Kiesling, and he loses at the Supreme Court, he's got his campaign is going to have serious problems. If the city auditors tell him that they're going to impose the penalty now, which they're supposed to do within 10 days, then he's going to have serious problems with that as well, because he's got all this money in his campaign coffers that is technically not legit.
Tell you what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to close, but one other little quick point is that it's my understanding he's a millionaire, so he figures it doesn't bother him anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's going to bother his campaign if it comes out.
Oh, yes.
He's not above the law.
Well,
Bruce.
I'll help him with that. I'll help with, but anyway, but by the way, how do they get in touch with you if they further would like to talk to you about this or any other media?
Well, we've had stories about this in the Oregonian, the Mercury, the Willamette Week,
How about Tribune?
and the Tribune.
Okay.
They've all and OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting. They've all done stories on it on their website.
How about Steve Dean of Channel 2 News, KTU? Has he
Well,
done
we
anything for you
contacted
guys?
the TV
Steve Dean,
people.
he's pretty big time. He's got TV, newscaster, and he's got his own show.
Well, I'll give you my phone number.
Yes, what is it?
503
503
358
358
8677.
8677. Again,
Anybody
that's Ron.
wants to talk to me
There
about
you
this,
go.
I'm happy
Okay.
to do it.
Well, appreciate that again. What's it
Bruce,
say?
nice being here. I'm glad you're interested in making the democracy work.
Very much so, to the people, and I am the people right now. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll come up with our second guest. Thanks very much, Ron.
Thank you, Bruce.
Happy holidays to you and the family.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, buddy.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend. Hey, we are back, folks. 2019 is on its way out, and 2020 is coming up. And right up front with you, we've got these are my notables, if you will, notable issues in 2019, and those will probably be the notable issues coming in 2020. Okay, so with that, we got Scott Jurgensen here. You've seen Scott here before. We've talked about a number of issues aspect of it, and actually one of the major concerns is the fact that the city of Portland is not districtized. You know, we've got 5 mayors. We've got 5 mayors, and the people don't know who to call. The only person that sticks out like a sore thumb is the sitting mayor, and then he's running the whole show, so to speak. So the bottom line is that I think that's a very, very important issue. And going in 2020, we're gonna need the people need to be represented on the city council. And right now, that's an issue. So that's going to be a big issue come 2020. So we got Scott here. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And that's one major piece because that's what he represents now. He talks to a solution to that issue. And then the other thing, maybe there might be a comment or two on the impeachment piece. That's the biggest thing going right now, besides the Seahawks. What's the score, Scott?
20 to 17 has been ugly.
2017. Who's that? Who's that? Cardinals? Or?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Jesus! Well, anyway, we better have this show here for 2019. That's another issue, but we'll deal with that in 2020. Okay, good. Scott, let us know. Give us the deal here. What do you think? Want to talk a little bit about the city first, or do you want to just get right into impeachment and just do that one?
Well, I think we talked about some of that last
We did
time I
that
was
last
here
time,
in
yeah.
November. Look, I mean, the city that I work for doesn't have districts, right? But it has 1,000 people, total population of 1,000. So in smaller towns, you tend to have at-large seats. Everybody's at-large. So we have a mayor and 4 councilors, all of them at-large. For a larger city like this,
Yes.
you probably could. I had mentioned before about the folks over on the east side, that they probably feel they haven't gotten the best representation
That's
over
true.
the years.
Yeah.
When they were annexed into the city, they were promised a lot of things that they never received, like sidewalks, paved roads, things like that. And I can just imagine their frustration watching the same areas downtown get, redeveloped and all this investment going in, including public investment, while they're sitting there going, wow, we don't have any parks out here. So that's a definite big issue in terms of representation. And I'm sure that if you cut the city in quadrants, that it's already in quadrants. Burnside splits it one way, the river splits it the other. Could you get decent counselors from each section of the city? Sure.
Yeah.
But you could.
And like you said, and that main part is the fact that if it was districtized aspect of it, normally the 3 votes per says it all in terms of at the end of the day, in terms of what we're going to do. And normally the mayor is 1 vote, right? Is 1 vote. The way it's structured right now, he can pretty well influence at least 2 of the other voters. I mean, 2 of the other council members. So
But
to
see,
speak.
realistically, right now, the way it's set up, you could have a mayor and everybody on the council from the same quadrant, right? I mean, they could all be neighbors for all it mattered. They could all be roommates, right? So you could have a house full of people living in one house, representing the entire city.
Wow. So how do you get anything passed for like you say, the person up in Southeast Portland?
Right, exactly. Well, I guess they'd have to go hang out at that house.
But like I said, I think the idea of seriously looking, that's again 2020, that's something that we seriously need to look at to make sure we do something. Just like we're talking about the whole issue of just the last interview with reference to
campaign finance,
aspect of it, to make sure that you get folks and from the various areas. Some folks in the Southwest Hills are far more prosperous than folks up in Southeast Portland or in some areas of Northeast Portland.
You also want to make sure that you're not going off and running silly experiments just for the sake of doing so.
Exactly.
I mean, they tried voter-financed elections a few years ago, and one of the candidates qualified for it and ended up having to pay all that money back.
Yes, right.
While working as a newscaster in like Idaho.
Exactly.
Now, and she did pay it all back,
Yes,
to her credit, but
Yes,
it took many, many years, and I think it
very interesting.
probably put dampers on that idea gaining any more traction going forward. And like as far as campaign finance goes, at the end of the day, I mean, every campaign, if you're going to be serious about it, you need to have staff. You have to pay them somehow. And most of the money that goes towards any campaign goes towards radio. It goes to TV. It goes, and it has diminished returns too. I mean, you were talking earlier about the governor's race, and I've seen legislative races in these districts where you say, for as much as you're spending, you could probably buy a couple of media outlets outright in this district, and long term, maybe you'd be better off. I don't know, you have an asset at least. But towards the end of some of these races where they have all this money, they literally just don't have anything to spend it on.
That's true.
Once you've done X number of direct mail pieces, once you've run the radio ads, I mean, you've got money to burn.
Right.
And sometimes they have cash left over at the end of it because they got so much cash.
Exactly. And not right now, in all due respect, one of the main things that I've identified, running is the whole issue of, which is one of the major concerns here within our city, is the homeless situation. That's huge, and unfortunately, the city council have no plan. No plan. They don't know what to do. If anything, they'll ask you for more taxes.
I'd say if anything, I mean, they've actively hindered one of the things that could have helped. We've talked repeatedly about Wapato and the fact that
Wapato.
you have,
That's
the county has spent $100 million on this facility that's been sitting there empty this whole time. And these guys these people scoff at the notion of putting anything out there or using it for anything, as opposed to giving it to a developer at a steal compared to what the
$5 million
taxpayer.
bucks.
You wouldn't spend your own money that way,
$5 million, and the thing was worth about $110 million,
including debt service and
That's
everything
right,
else.
exactly.
Yeah.
But we were fortunate, if you will, to have a developer who understood what was going on. He was in business, but all of a sudden he put the property back on the table and said, "Okay, fine, we need to do something with this for homeless." As far for right now, for that matter. So anyway, that was a good thing that this gentleman Jordan Snitzer, he's here. Fortunately, he's from Oregon. Fortunately, he's here in the city of Portland, and he's sensitive about some of the issues and we're fortunate. It could have been another developer just flip off the property, put $75 million in his pocket, and say thank you very much. Okay, good, and bye. Next. You know what I'm saying? Well, look, let's get right up into the impeachment issue. What are some of your feelings now to date? Realize that it's not over with yet. It hasn't gone to the Senate yet, but my point is that it would be neat to get some comments going into 2020 because that's another issue. That's a big issue. And so hopefully by the time February 2 comes up, the month of February, we want to have some of that. We're going to invite you back on to kind of give us a feel of what that's all about. Okay, let's talk about that.
It almost reminds me of the last time we had an impeachment in this country, which was towards the end of the Clinton administration. And that was also very political and had a lot of the same consequences, where you had divided government, and one party decided to use all of their political capital to impeach a sitting president when you had peace and prosperity, only to send it to a Senate that president's party controlled. So it was dead on arrival in the Senate then, it's dead on arrival in the Senate now, and it's just bad politics. Now, what I will say is that the president managed to raise $5 million for his campaign the day that he was impeached on Wednesday. So it helped him tremendously in that regard. His base still supports him. So it's not costing him any support among the people who supported him. And the same folks that are giddy about impeachment are the same ones who were protesting when he was elected back in 2016. So I don't think it changes anything in the bigger picture of things. And I think it's a hollow victory. But what it does also is you had a lot of these Democratic congressmen elected this last election in districts that had gone for Trump in 2016. Right, and they ran as moderates, as, hey, I'm a different kind of Democrat. I'm going to get things done. I've got rural sensibilities. So now these guys are having to go back home to their districts and answer constituents who are saying, so why aren't you getting anything done? And so this is the focus of your efforts right here. This is what you've been doing. So all this stuff on impeachment and nothing on infrastructure, nothing on any of their day-to-day bread and butter concerns. And the polls seem to indicate that it's helping him. Which I wouldn't have guessed, but I think there's a lot of similarities between this and the when Bill Clinton was impeached. It's all the political sideshow.
It was kind of interesting how, like you said, at the end of this piece, just recently, if you will, it's all of a sudden the trade issue was a major deal, and it was just sitting on the table, and then all of a sudden, right after the impeachment, after the vote the next day, they passed the bill.
Well, here's the other thing worth noting. On the day the impeachment articles were passed in the House, you know what was happening over in the Senate in the other chamber? 13 judicial appointments. Right? So that was kind of flying under the radar this whole time. Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, that's been his focal point. And the conservative base, right, one of the things that gets them to the polls, that keeps them to the polls, is the judicial branch. That was one of the things that I think brought a lot of Republican voters who were skeptical about Trump, who weren't so sure about him. That was the thing that brought them home in 2016, was the thought that Supreme Court nominations, right? And as soon as you said that to any Republican voter, even if they had supported Bush or Rubio or any of these other guys, Cruz, they said, oh, well, this is pretty important. So the fact of the matter is, this administration, and these are lifelong appointments, for judges who, all the folks being appointed are fairly young. So what this means is a much longer lasting legacy than even a 4-year or 8-year term.
Well, the Democrats should have understood that. Did they understand that?
I think they were distracted over here with the
kinds
impeachment,
of things.
while literally in the other chamber over here in the Senate, where, and they have options too. So they can take and do this trial. They could, do it speedy and dismiss it and say, this is nonsense. Let's get back to business, right? Let's work on trade agreements and all these other things that have piled up.
Right.
Or maybe they drag it out, because the fact of the matter is, some of your presidential candidates are sitting U.S. senators, right? So you say, to what extent do you want Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to have that platform? And some of the other ones too, like Booker, but I don't think he's he hasn't broken into that top tier, and I don't think he's going to. So you could drag it out, in theory, but the problem with that is that if you're the Republican senators and you're up for re-election, that keeps you in D.C. and not at home campaigning. So it's a double-edged sword. It's not like it was in 2018 where the Democrats had more U.S. Senate seats to defend. This time around, because of the electoral map and the way it looks, the Republicans have more seats to defend. So it probably boils down to individual members saying, we don't want to drag this out for months, right? I've got a tough election fight on my hand. I want to be back home in my district campaigning. And maybe you don't want to give Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders that kind of bully pulpit role as jurors, sitting senators during an impeachment trial. So maybe you do just wrap it up quickly and go back to ramming through judicial nominations and appointments.
Well, again, along that same line, you made that point once before, and that was the fact that the judicial part of it, the judges in the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, wow. And I think that...
and it's the lower courts, too. It's the appellate courts, it's the district courts, it's the circuit courts, and I think between all of them, you have about 60 now that have been confirmed through the Senate. Why didn't they focus in that arena? I mean, they had to vote on that issue. They had majority. They had majority vote on the House side aspect of it. Right.
And that's still a process. It's not just a total Senate side. It's both entities.
And all they're doing is creating problems for their vulnerable freshman members.
Yes.
Who got narrowly elected in Republican districts. So they're putting them in a very difficult position.
Well, plus, even if they did get elected, again, the majority is going to be sitting with the Republicans as far as judgeships in the Supreme Court.
And that's going to go on for decades now, including the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, right, that we belong to here in Oregon on the West Coast. Most overturned of all the circuits, right, is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He's made enough appointments there to where it's actually tilting it. So right? It's not a conservative majority, but it's a lot closer than it's been.
So there's going to be a major challenge then, maybe some creative challenging of the Constitution now, I guess, in the next session. I'm just throwing that out.
Well, all it does is raise the stakes, but here's what you have going on with the election, right? It's different than it was last time, where you had a whole bunch of Republican candidates.
Right.
And entire super PACs devoted to defeating Donald Trump. Billions of dollars spent in the primaries against good candidates. Congressmen, U.S. senators, governors. None of them could even get any oxygen in the room because Donald Trump was already world famous and had been for decades, right? Nobody knew who Marco Rubio was, but everyone knows who Donald Trump is. And then meanwhile, you had, kind of a token primary on the other side where Bernie Sanders put up a decent fight, but everyone kind of knew that the fix was in for Hillary, and the Democratic National Committee, the fix was in for Hillary. That's been proven. So she was able to gather resources and raise money while the support was split on this side. Well, it's different this time around. The Republican base is firmly behind Trump. He's raising money. He doesn't have any serious primary challengers. And on the Democratic side, you've still got a long primary road ahead of you. And you've definitely got your top tier, and some of the lower tier candidates are starting to drop off, but they're not done yet. And they're going to be going on for a while.
Wow.
And raising money and splitting those funds while he's just sitting on, and a lot of the folks who had donated, a lot of your traditional Republican voters who donated to Bush, donated to Kasich, Rubio, Cruz, guys like that who wouldn't donate to Trump are donating to Trump now.
Yeah. Well, I think another major factor along that line, when you think about Trump and you think about major media, and I'm talking about the two major top ones, CNN and Fox, they were all in New York. They were all in New York. They knew Trump for years, if you will, on both sides. And it was kind of interesting. All of a sudden, they just got a little tit for tat type thing, and it just stayed right there. And there was the rest of the world here. I'm just saying, it's not. He's just a stranger. The guy, in all due respect, the guy wasn't even elected, appointed to dog catcher or anything. For that matter, he just got in there and went through the deal, and all of a sudden there he is. But then I think one of the major causes and reasons for that was because of the major media. It was just kind of like a tit for tat. I mean,
he was the star of the most popular show on television for years,
yes.
right? The Apprentice, and I didn't watch it. I wasn't much interested in it, but everyone else was.
It was a New York thing.
Look, and he had been in Home Alone 2. I mean, he was on the Howard Stern show for years. I mean, everyone knew who Donald Trump was. So that kind of name recognition is hard to beat, unless you're someone named Clinton.
That's
I mean, that was, and people had made up their minds about both of them decades ago.
Well, anyway, that's a major piece for 2019, and it still is a major piece. And again, that's why I'm saying that's going to be a major, major issue come 2020.
But it's a continuation of the same narrative, because ever since he took office, you had the Mueller probe, and you had, Russia, 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 and that all turned out to be nonsense. So it's all been just the same thing that the folks who were adamantly opposed to him from the beginning are still adamantly opposed to him. But his supporters, his base, they're still very much with him.
Right. But I think, though, again, another major benefit coming in 2020, and I'm looking forward to it. It was a government, and that's why we're so strong. It was a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It was designed that way. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, out of all of the ruckuses that were happening in 2019 and back, all of a sudden that will be going under the table, and we're going to end up being, i.e., if you will, again, a heck of an America, if you will.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the precedent that gets set here, too, because the founders put this in place. There's reasons you have midterm elections, right? It's a check on one party getting elected in a presidential election year and being in charge of everything like the Republicans were after 2016. So then you have midterm elections. And that's a check and balance.
Right.
I mean, are you going to have this happen now every time you have divided government, where you have Congress controlled by one party and the presidency controlled by the other, where, okay, just for the sake of politics, we're going to impeach the guy? I mean, you could.
Good. Well, Scott, look, thanks again. Thanks very much for your input here at the Oregon Voters Digest. You've always been an asset, as you know. And hopefully in February, I'm sure within this January, when we're going to be closing, there's going to be all kinds of things. And that's when we really, really will get into the whole issue of impeachment and other issues along that line, okay? Sure. Sounds good. Happy holidays to you and the family. How's that little bambino doing there?
She's sleeping in the parking lot last time I saw her.
Oh, my God. Okay, good. We're going to take a short break, folks, and we're going to come up with our last end of the show. We're going to get some young guys who are going to be basically going to comment from Antifa and the Patriot Prayer kind of a deal. I mean, here in the city of Portland, throughout the country for that matter. I mean, they were given a very negative kind of, involvement piece during that era. And the only thing that the city of Portland was always looked at was the whole idea of the disruption downtown.
But I have a solution for all of it. I've said all along, form soccer teams. Right? Soccer hooliganism has served Britain well for decades. You can do it here, too.
Okay, good. What we're going to do, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to bring these guys on, and we're going to do it that way. Okay, good. We'll take a short break. Okay? Scott, again, a pleasure.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Okay, look like we're back again, and here's the third segment of our show come to closing of the 2019, going in 2020, but again, a major issue. Because back in my days, it was kind of like, okay, fine, I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I went through that structured kind of a situation, and then naturally my life reflected that. And a lot of us reflected that way during that particular time. There's no draft now at this point in time, and we're in the tech kind of a deal, and a lot of folks were kind of like gotten into the tech part aspect of it, and I was not a part of that, you know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, these are the futures, you know. We got to look at futures, and that's one thing we are here at the Oregon Voters Digest. We made sure we spent quite a bit of time in that arena, and I was fortunate to have met with some of the young folks that were out there, Antifa and Patriot Prayer. And Joy Gibson, it was Joy Gibson and the Patriot Prayer aspect of it. And then I met my dear friend Brady here, sitting right here. And then there was Patrick and just a number of folks. And then I naturally had the opportunity to meet with James, another person who happens to be in L.A., Los Angeles, and very familiar with some of the issues that are similar issues that we were having here and around the country, for that matter.
I've been to Portland before.
You've been to Portland before, but I'm just saying. But you know, the issue was all across the board, Eugene.
Yes.
And as you know, my dear friend Brady, he's got his brand on right now, and he's got another piece of the brand. Now I remember that. That was a pretty good movie, by the way. I remember that. I remember the movie.
Very good lesson in that movie.
Yes, very much so. So anyway, what we're going to do, we're going to go on and jump right into their comments in terms of what they felt about 2019 and what the movement was all about. In fact, let's start off that way from their standpoint. What was the purpose? What do you think? If I were to ask you, what was the purpose of the movement from your perspective?
Which movement?
The Antifa,
The climate, the weather.
the climate of the young folks. Got me? Millennial type.
I think it's just a response to white nationalism and this rise of white supremacy, sort of again, like back in the 1960s. But I don't want to veer off topic. But last time I was here with James on the phone, I reintroduced him because in some way I actually wanted Patrick and James on at the same time because these are people who have actually been completely sidelined by Patriot Prayer. Joey's ignored Patrick. I think he's pretty much ignored you, and I don't really know.
With the exception of the one phone call I received. That was the last time I talked to Joey Gibson. No, I found myself in a situation where I was brought up here, transferred from Los Angeles to work at KXL FM, and I was supposed to be a new evening news anchor for the city of Portland, during which time the feds approached me, and they had this idea that they wanted reporter embedded with Patriot Prayer. I use air quotes because that encompasses multiple groups, whether it's Proud Boys or Haley Adams and her Portland's Resistance and so forth. And very quickly it became extremely evident that from reaching out to like contacts on the left and hearing and seeing what was going on the right, and then the Fed involvement and everything, being very evident, very clear, very quick that the feds were stoking this fire, above and beyond what is safe to say.
So what's the definition of the feds?
FBI. DHS, some of those organizations. Last time we were on, we actually left off talking about that subject. I was going to go into the fact that Haley Adams and Alyssa, their Portland's Liberation in front of Ted Wheeler's house, their most recent rally in front of Ted Wheeler's house, there was a guy who got picked up because of red flag laws. He said he was going to find out where Antifa lives if they start getting killed off and slaughter them essentially in their bedrooms. He got picked up by the feds. He got his guns taken away. He got admitted into a psych ward. And this is somebody who did 2 tours of duty, I think, in Afghanistan.
You have a situation here where the feds are telling, let's say, the right, Patriot Prayer, as an example, everything's fine, go to this event, you'll all be safe, we've checked it out, we've got people there now, plain clothes, it's all going to be fine, no confrontations, Meanwhile, they're on the phone with Antifa saying the exact same things. And then the two groups arrive, and then it's like, whoa, wait, you're stalking us. No, you're stalking us. And then clash, and the police are removed. It's like assassinations, Bruce. They're not... They don't happen, they're allowed to happen. JFK, RFK, Princess Diana, the security is removed at the right moment, and it's allowed to happen. Just like the police are removed at the right moment, and these clashes in downtown Portland are allowed to happen.
Who's responsible for that?
The FBI.
The federal government, to some extent, for
Yes.
sure.
Yes, deep state, whatever you want to call it. Another component is the fake news. I can say, is having been in the KXL newsroom, there was, by the time my reports got a little too truthful, let's say, there was a gag order immediately placed over the newsroom. Shortly thereafter, I lost my job, and shortly thereafter, I was ostracized and told to leave the Patriot hemisphere as a reporter, and was glad to do so because so many of them had such terrible personalities that, I mean, it left a lot to be desired to have to put up with it on a daily basis and get paid next to nothing and then nothing, and then and just watch. It's like Groundhog Day. It's like we woke up every day and it was the same thing every day, and the same spiel and the same trickery and the same everything. And KXL is a CBS affiliate. The parent company is Alpha Media. They basically own all the radio stations here in Portland and have their sister affiliations with the right television networks. So essentially, what's coming up in 2020, I would say, as an independent investigative journalist in Los Angeles, like right now, for example, I'm up here investigating of my own merit the death of a journalist, a colleague for 20 years. Her name is Tracy Twyman. She was an executive producer at KXL FM for many years of the Clyde Lewis Show. She was recently suicided, and that
is that even a word?
Yeah, it is now, I think, actually suicided. Yeah, we have this mounting pile of bodies of journalists, and that's a problem. It's a big one. And the last place, matter of fact, that she was seen trying to give information in regard to an investigation she was conducting about pedophilia, and the Jeffrey Epstein case and everything. She took it to the Portland FBI. That's one of the last good known places she was seen alive, and she was scared for her life. And they're saying that she hung herself. Well, I'm not ready to reveal because I haven't concluded my own investigation yet. So I'm not ready to reveal the gory details, but let's just say it is an active homicide investigation. It's in Vancouver, Washington, not Portland. There seems confusion about that. Portland's pointing the finger saying it's Vancouver, it's Portland. And no, it's Vancouver, it's Clark County Sheriff's Department, and it is still an ongoing investigation, even though the little tiny bit you find on the internet says suicide, hanging, a lot of internet lore and fantasy then kicks into play, and I think it's very inappropriate and it's sad. Just a month ago, another journalist in California, Jennifer Janes, was suicided, shot in the head twice, ruled suicide. She was working on a controversial book attacking the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry. So when I was in 2013 living in Hollywood and Michael Hastings died, his car exploded 2 blocks down the street from my apartment in Hollywood. Mercedes, especially brand new ones, don't just explode at 25, 30 miles an hour on Highland Avenue in Hollywood, California.
Let's touch on how the media has actually kind of touched on our local politics and our national politics a bit. Because we've talked about this on the phone quite a bit, on how to tackle fake news. We've talked about maybe a non-profit watchdog organization sort of existing. We've talked about, fact checkers or something akin to that. I mean, there's got to be a better way, because we don't have decent protections for that here in America compared to, I think, other countries. They've figured it out a little bit better. But this is where I do kind of want to go into a segment with my mask here, is This is the Guy Fawkes mask. It's banned in a few different countries. It's been in multiple protests because of that. Things like the Arab Spring, stuff like that. And it's a very revolutionary symbol. And we know after the Andy Ngo attack at one of these protests, these patriots, these same group of people have advocated for anti-mask laws. I don't really believe that's going to work out. It's not going to stop street violence. It's not going to stop gang violence. But, I mean, this is the larger scenario with the media now because there's an information warfare kind of thing going on. We look at the Clock of Atomic Scientists and what it says on the 2 minutes to midnight. They put that in there, information warfare.
It's also important to know that not just the fake news apparatus, which is massive would be an understatement. I come from a CBS pioneering family. We at one time owned the LA Times, my family. So I know what I'm saying when I'll repeat a quote from my grandfather when I was a child. Don't believe anything you hear and half of what you read. And he was talking about our own affiliates and things. And for a long time as a youth, I just sort of brushed that off. I was like, what, you know, there he goes being weird and all that again. But no, it's true. Los Angeles, there's a joke there. Hollywood is the fourth branch of government. There's also another more crude joke that Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. And the deep-rootedness of the news, I don't even think it's fair to say it's, oh, CNN, oh, Fox. It's more like Sinclair Broadcasting is your megalithic conservative outlet. Maybe you could say MSNBC's on the left, or NBC Universal, the parent company. Perhaps you could maybe try to say CNN is centrist, at least in its set decor and casting. But the point is that all this is written, it's fed to them on teleprompters, and that is not journalism. Local journalists like Andy Ngo and Brandon Farley and people like that who show a bias and engage
Project Veritas.
Yeah, and engage in ambush journalism that Mike Wallace invented back in the day in 60 Minutes, who my grandfather cast that and created that show. It's frowned upon. It's not journalistically, ethically sound.
They cut content, and it turns into a Joe Biggs scenario.
Well, look, guys, you know, in all due respect, again, as you said, this is 2019. You guys are going to be right back here in 2020 because I'm interested. We're very interested in terms of will there be light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see any idea of some idea of a light at the end of the tunnel that says, "Hey, look here, things are going to get back together," so to speak? Okay, so keep that in mind. And secondly, how do we get in touch with someone real quick? Like, give me a phone number.
Crusade Media.
CrusadeMedia.org.
On PDX Lab on YouTube.
Okay, good. So look here, we sort of ended the show, folks. Here we are again. And as you can see, 2019 is not over with, but we have some idea, and that's what this is a major